evening, everybody. My name is Dania Dunkley. I go by Dr. D. Um, but I'm really excited about coming on tonight and talking about a topic that is truly near and dear to my heart, and that is about diversity in nursing leadership, right? How do we develop more diverse nurse leaders? What is the importance of this topic? Because of our current status in healthcare, we know that we're seeing health inequities, and it's been recommended that we help to develop more diverse nurse leaders in order to better serve the needs of diverse communities. I'm sorry if I sound a little raspy. I've been trying to get over a cold, an illness all week. And today is actually the first day I feel like something and I'm able to, speak clearly without coughing. So I was about to cancel, and then I woke up this morning and I felt so much better. So let's go forward. So I have just a few slides, and then I'm going to take comments and questions and suggestions because I want this to be interactive as well as much as we can through this format. But how do we define diversity in nursing? What does that actually look like? Right. And there are several definitions that float around, but I found this from Queensborough Community College, and they list several points that I think are tremendous in terms of how we define diversity in nursing, and diversity in general, but specifically as it relates to nursing, right? These are some of the points that I thought were really important for us to really hone in on what it is that we're talking about, because those terms, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are floating around. And I don't think people necessarily know what is included when we're talking about diversity. And for me, I just want to highlight one portion that is really key, is that it includes more than just race. So initially, when we hear the term diversity, we may automatically go towards race as one identity, but it can include race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, which are not one and the same, right? Socioeconomic status, religious beliefs, and so forth, and age, right? So when we're talking about becoming a more diverse organization or having diverse representation, I see you all. Welcome. I see Houston, Texas, Boulder, Colorado, and Los Angeles. Oh my goodness, you're all the way across. So welcome. It is 6:48 p.m. here on the East Coast. So you all are 3 hours behind, I think. Welcome. So what's really important, though, is that with this diversity, there is a sense of respect, right? And that's that second bullet point there, practicing a mutual respect for things, qualities, or experiences that are different from our own, right? And exploring these differences in a safe way, in an environment that feels safe to each individual, right? And with this diversity, right, outward diversity or diversity of ethnicity, race, gender, and all of the others that we listed already, right, comes diversity of thought, which is really what's so important about developing diverse nurse leaders, is that we all come with a diversity of backgrounds, experiences, expertise, right, that we can bring to the table. And that's what's key to charting a path towards health equity, is that we include all these different voices and thought leadership at the table. And so what does our current state of diversity in nursing even look like? All right. As a whole, we are making strides, but still not where we need to be as it relates to just the profession in general. And I know I just finished saying that nurse diversity represents more than just race and ethnicity. And this slide has a lot to do with race and ethnicity, but it also has some other things. These are the areas where we're most lacking, right? We have an age group of about 48 to 50 years old that represent the profession, right? And so we have an aging population of nurses. We do, thankfully, and this is a great sign that we're increasing in numbers in terms of male representation. So that's really important for diversity, right? We have some of our nurses represent other countries. They completed their training in other countries. And as you can see here is listed like the different statistics as it relates to the racial breakdown. And so I'm highlighting just a few of these. 7.8 African American, and this is from the HRSA 2019 data. 5.2 Asian American or Asian, and 10.2 Hispanic. And so we can see that the vast majority is, of course, white and Caucasian. However, that in and of itself is a problem, or it's problematic because, right, that those numbers do not adequately reflect the diversity in our population. So this is why it's a concern. I promise you, this is not going to be a lecture. I'm laying the foundation, and then I'm going to turn this thing off, and we're going to talk to each other about how we can develop more nurse leaders. And I'm sorry, it's the educator in me. I got to have a presentation. I'm sorry. Just stay with me for a moment. And so the current landscape as it relates specifically now to diversity in leadership, to diversity in leadership, right? Right now, we're looking at a lag also in that area. So about 5% of RNs account for seats in hospital boards, all across the board. So we're not talking about any specific identity, right? And just talking in general, we, as the largest part of the healthcare workforce, we represent the largest part of the healthcare workforce, only represent 5% of hospital board seats, right? And this was data from 2014, which is the most recent that we have, right? How is that, right? But as we continue, white nurses occupy about 80% of all nurse executive titles, which means that the remaining percent is split amongst all the other represented ethnicities and races, right? As it relates to minorities in general, right? 14% of board members, 11% of executive positions, and only about 19% of first and mid-level managers, right, in healthcare. And so you can see that there are definitely some inequities in terms of representation in leadership, right? Which is why we're having this conversation, right? So what does it look like in terms of nursing education? Because sometimes I hear this comment and it makes me itch because it's not really true that organizations can't find qualified individuals to fill positions. And when we talk about qualifications in terms of educational requirements, we know that that's just part of the pie, right? But if you're talking about educational requirements, minorities actually are ahead of the curve in terms of educational accomplishments. So if you, I'll just point out just a few, right? RNs from minority backgrounds are more likely to have baccalaureate and higher degrees. And actually, proportionately, more Black and African American and Asian RNs have masters or doctorates. But at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that only 15.9% of full-time nursing faculty come from diverse backgrounds. So something is off, right? We have all these going to advanced, but the representation is not there. And this is part of the reason we're having, again, I'm laying the foundation for why we're having the conversation tonight. So then how does diverse nursing leadership help? Like, why do we need this? Like, what's the point of developing diverse nurse leaders? Well, a part of that is that what nurses do is serve communities, serve individuals, serve families, right? And we can't really adequately do that if we don't reflect that population. And so I wanted to highlight this quote here from the Future of Nursing report, because that is something that is currently guiding our practice, right? And the highlighted areas, right, that nurses at every level, right? So when I say leadership, I'm not just talking about leadership titles in terms of developing diverse nurse leaders, right? Nurses at all levels and across all settings are positioned to lead, because our core training is meant for us to be able to reach out into communities and be able to advance health efforts in order to achieve that health equity. So educational institutions, health systems, everyone can participate in this process to better empower and develop nurse leaders, right? It's going to be even more important now as we see from the COVID-19 pandemic, that we focus on expanding our pool of capable and competent nurse leaders, right? And these are just a few recommendations from that report. And one that I want to highlight is that nurse leaders have a responsibility to address structural racism, cultural racism, and discrimination based on identity. So if we have a homogenous pool of nurse leaders, then who will address the inequities? Who will address the systemic racism? Right? We definitely need allyship, but we also need the representation in order, again, to stimulate that diverse thought, the innovation that comes when you get a diverse group of nurse leaders in the room to tackle these issues, right? And the other thing is, the recommendation here is that a critical role for nurse leaders is mentoring and sponsoring nurses from underrepresented communities. Now, that word underrepresented, I'm getting used to taking it out of my vocabulary, because I think that it untruthfully frames what's the actual issue is that these minorities and other ethnic groups have been systemically excluded, right? It's not that they're necessarily underrepresented, right? That's maybe part of the problem. So I want to shift now into the point of our conversation. How then do we develop more diverse nurse leaders? Like how do we do it? What are some of the tips and tools that are available to us so that we can get this important work done? And I have a few recommendations. I'm going to see if I can make this, there we go, a little bigger for you. And so one of the things that I've seen as I do my research and as I have conversations with other nursing experts and leaders is talking about from the front end, right? How are we preparing nurses as they enter schools of nursing, and even going before that, right? Recruitment, right? So we talk about this underrepresentation. Are we spending the time to recruit, right? Individuals, minorities into programs of nursing, right? Do they know and feel that it's an option for them, right? When they get into these programs, are we providing the financial support and access to different programs that can help fund their education? Because that's one of the things too, is that students, high school students, might want to pursue a career in nursing, but the funding is just not there, right? How can we point these students in the right direction so that we have a bigger pool coming into the profession to then occupy these positions of leadership? And not just that, but also increasing leadership education concepts, right? When we're teaching new nursing students, are we really infusing leadership concepts into the nursing curricula, right? Intentionally, right? And I'm going to say that word a lot tonight. Creating a culture of inclusion. So this is both applicable to nursing programs as well as healthcare organizations, right? How are you intentionally focusing on creating a culture of inclusion, which includes recruitment efforts, retention, right? So not just recruiting, but are folks staying? in your organizations, right? The development and promotion of diverse talent. One of the things in my leadership career in the past, we would get um, a position available, and the first thing we would think about doing is posting, right? And posting it externally. I don't just mean internally. And that's to me problematic in a few ways, because is that saying that you have, as an organization, haven't taken the time to mentor and develop leaders internally, right? That can then step up when a position becomes vacant and available? Are we not giving folks the opportunity to develop and grow internally, right? So diversity also should be reflected in our methodologies that we use, right? So it shouldn't be a one size fits all, because a one size doesn't fit all, right? So when we talk about leadership development, right, is it that when your leaders come into your organizations, they go to one management training class and then we push them out, and then they never get any additional training, right? Is the management class even tailored to nursing leadership? Because I know I've been to management trainings that were for the entire organization. So what happens is folks come on orientation, and then everybody that's in a leadership role will get sent to this leadership class or management training, right? Which is good. I'm not saying it's bad, right? But there are other nuances and things that might get missed when we do this one size fits all type of training, right? How are we catering to the needs of nurses in leadership? How are we catering to the needs of minorities in leadership? How are we catering to the diverse needs of nurse leaders, right? We talked about those different identities at the beginning, right? For male nurses, or for nurses with different physical abilities, right? How are we diversifying even the methodology that we use to train and develop and support nurse leaders, right? And we should also be infusing leadership training at all levels. So, not like I said, nursing leadership doesn't necessarily mean a title of nursing leadership, right? So whether you are still at the bedside or you're in this all the way up to the C-suite, right? Those leadership concepts, right, starting from the programs of nursing in schools all the way through, right, should be threaded, because there are levels of leadership that need to be ingrained in our practice, even at the bedside, right? How does an individual at the bedside show that they're a leader within their organization without having a formal title, right? And I think that this will help contribute to better practice at the bedside, right? And again, I talked a little bit about incentives, right? Or organizational incentives to reduce financial barriers, to make it easier for your folks to be able to go and obtain the advanced degrees, obtain the certifications that they're going to need, right, to qualify and to be better leaders, right? So it's, I think, partly for the organization, right, to make it a sweeter deal for nurses and others to want to go back to school, right? So that you can then develop from within your organizations, right? And create these partnerships and incentives financially to lessen the financial burden. And lastly, really critical, right? Research, study after study has shown that mentorship is so critical, right? It's that pairing of thought leaders, of experts with a more novice nurse leader, to be able to pour into them and develop them and support them, and to be able to answer questions that may not come up until in the moment, right? We can't necessarily train, right, and educate on every little nuance. But this is where having a mentor to bounce your thoughts and your questions, right, and to have that ongoing support from a person who's maybe been already where you're trying to go in your leadership journey, right? So key, right? As a matter of fact, right, the studies that I've seen and in my own research, right, show that leadership opportunities, right, the availability of leadership opportunities and mentorship, right, are top areas of concern for specifically for minorities, right? They don't feel that their organizations uh, invest enough in developing them as leaders within their organizations, right? And not necessarily so they can get a title, right? But just giving them opportunities to participate in a project or or initiate or create an initiative, right? That they can take the credit for in terms of leadership at their level, right? And Kingston wants to participate in the conversation. But so that's the totality of the slides, right? And I'm going to leave that for a little bit later. I want to come back and just kind of browse the room and see how folks are feeling about some of the things that I've said, right? What are some of the things that you're doing in your organizations, right, to develop diverse nurse leaders? And I can see your comments as they pop up, and I'll try to address them as soon as I see anything. Again, there's a little bit of a delay in transmitting the broadcast to you, so I'll be patient this time. I won't panic like I did before. What are you doing in your organizations to help develop nurse leaders? Or what do you think are key areas of focus when we're talking about developing diverse nurse leadership? Do you have any questions for me about how we can continue this conversation on developing diverse nurse leaders? Okay, I see a comment coming in. Okay, once strengths are identified, they should be developed to create new nurse leaders. Excellent. I completely agree with you, Corinne. Thank you for that comment. Right. A good leader, right, in an organization, right, is paying attention to their staff to make sure that they are one asking, right? Because sometimes folks may not be forthcoming, right, in stating their objective to want to go to another level or to step up into a leadership role. So sometimes we have to ask, as leaders, right? Are you interested in opportunities for growth? What are some of your strengths? How can I help you develop those, right? To be able, like you said, Corinne, to develop or create new leaders. Absolutely. Mentorship, so key. Thank you, Vanessa. As I said, I, unfortunately didn't realize the value of having a mentor when I was in those formal leadership positions. But, I quickly learned that were key people that I needed to make sure that I consulted, that I asked questions, right? That's why it's invaluable to have a good mentor or more than one sometimes in the process, right? To develop nurse leaders, there must be those of us willing to mentor. Yes. And sometimes, when you get to a certain status in your career, right, it's just busy, go, and the demand and the responsibility and the weight becomes more and more. And, sometimes folks shy away from being formal mentors or devoting their time to be mentors, right? But if we truly want to see more diversity in nursing leadership, right, we have to be willing to carve out the time to participate as mentors, right, for the young. Someone said, I definitely feel mentorship is important, and I wish organizations partnered nurse leaders with a strong leader in the organization. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. A lot of times when I had orientation coming in as a new leader in the organization, I was paired with someone to kind of shadow for a day or so, or it could be longer, but something like that, where at the end of that prescribed term, it was kind of like, okay, you're on your own, or feel free to ask me any questions. But the value of that ongoing relationship and support is really key. Those questions aren't being asked. Other leaders see that as a threat. I'm Corinne, I'm assuming that you meant about your comment from earlier about once strengths are identified, they should be developed to create new leaders. Yes, I can see where leaders might see asking their staff that question as threatening, and I think that those individuals are doing a disservice to their team, right? When you are able to identify the strengths of your staff and pour into them and develop those strengths and cultivate new leaders, that is actually a plus. Another notch on your leadership belt, because the buck should never stop with just you. A true leader is going to produce more leaders, right? And maybe even better leaders than you were to begin with, right? And that indicates a person who is mature and secure and confident in their own leadership abilities, and not and doesn't isn't threatened easily by someone on their team who they're supposed to be molding, right? As a threat. So thank you for bringing that comment. I can definitely see that. I'm a new leader at my organization. My old organization made me feel like I had to be overly qualified compared to my white counterparts who were able to grow into their roles. My boss literally told me she wished she had time to mentor me like my peers, but I just don't. She didn't even try. Yes, so unfortunately, another reason why we're having this conversation, right, is because of the obstacles that nurses face whenever they are trying to navigate that career ladder, right? They meet so much resistance at times. They are not, their skills and talents are not weighed equitably to their counterparts. And much of the reason at times is because of differences in race and ethnicity, unfortunately, or some identity, right? Some part of their identity that they can't change, right? So I totally understand where your comment is coming from, because too often that is the case. And then, like I presented earlier, right? We, as minorities, we go and we get the advanced degrees and the extra certifications and the this and the that, and we're still not sometimes able to compete with others, like you said, who are able to grow into their roles, but we have to already come with everything that they weren't necessarily judged for. And that, right, is a part of organizational culture. Some of it is individual bias and discrimination, right? But that individual is allowed to is empowered to do things like that because of the culture of that organization, right? So we have to be intentional. Healthcare organizations must be intentional on how their leaders are also supporting other nurse leaders and developing other nurse leaders, right? It shouldn't always be that you're the only one shining on your teams, right? And that's that culture of inclusivity that I mentioned earlier. it has to be threaded throughout the organization. Start identifying, developing, and encouraging leadership skills as early as nursing school. Ding, ding, ding. Yep. And I had that as well as one of my recommendations, right? We have to start from the top, from the beginning. One of the things, one of the classes that I currently teach, right, is specifically designed to discuss and investigate several different concepts inherent in nursing, right? And one of those things is about roles and responsibilities. How do you communicate with your team, right? What is a strong team? How do you manage conflict, right? Things that are all transferable in terms of leadership, right? I totally agree with that comment of starting early. It's essential to be aware of those around you, encourage others as you identify their talents and strengths. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that sums up part of our discussion that we had before, right? Being a leader in your organization, it is incumbent on you to identify others, the strengths of others, and also their weaknesses, but we tend to sometimes focus more on the weaknesses. It's really important, right? And like I said before, it's a good reflection on yourself as a leader when you're able to cultivate other leaders within your organization, right? When you have a vacancy and you can point to a sea of talent within your organization because you've done that work to develop other leaders, right? Thank you all so much for these comments. I'm loving it. Anyone else? I'm going to refresh one more time because I noticed when I refreshed, I saw more comments pop up. Amazing, amazing. Okay. So I'm going to keep going. And if I see more comments pop up, I will address those. For those of you who are watching the replay, please leave your questions and comments so we can keep the conversation going later, even after the broadcast has ended. So I want to bring back this last slide, and then we'll wrap up for the evening, right? So this is, let me see if I can put myself so it doesn't look like I'm just a talking head. I'll put it side by side. So basically, I wanted to, one of the things that I mentioned is about offering, to develop diverse nurse leaders, you also have to diversify your methodologies for developing the leaders, right? It can't be one program, one size fits all, one time, and you check the box. It doesn't, you have to continue to find ways to pour into your leaders. Right. And we specifically focused a lot on minority groups tonight because those groups are underrepresented as it relates to positions of formal positions of nursing leadership. And we know that in order to achieve or to make any advancements in health equity, right, we need to adequately reflect the populations that we serve at every level in nursing. Right. And so, as many of you may know, I've created a program called the Sequel Effect. And it started off as a 3-hour masterclass. And I have recently launched more of a group coaching program that is an extended version of that signature curriculum that started off as a masterclass. And basically, the program is designed specifically for minority nurse leaders, right? That is the focus. And we need more programs like these because, like I said, there are nuances and specific lived experiences that minority nurses in leadership may have, right, that aren't going to be covered in your traditional one-size-fits-all type of approach to nursing development, leadership development. And this program will cover those areas. It will provide strategies for dealing with the many challenges and obstacles. And one of the things that's really important in, in supporting nurse leaders is that sense of validation. And specifically as it relates to minority nurse leaders, right? I can't tell you how many times as I have offered the program before in the classes, I hear the comment, "Oh my gosh, this is me." Or if when I've presented my research, which incidentally was about being Black and female as a nurse, when becoming, excuse me, a nurse executive, right? That was my doctoral research. I've presented at conference after conference, and every time, right, the study is now, I've defended in 2018, the study is now 3 years old. And every time I've presented, I hear the same comments time and time after again. This is me. Oh my goodness, you're describing my experience. I'm still experiencing this, right? And you're validating my experience. It is really, really important, right? When organizations create programs as it relates to minorities and developing diverse and minority leaders, is to create a sense of inclusion, right? And that sometimes comes from that sense of validation that you get from a program that is targeted to your needs, targeted to your lived experiences, right? Which is why I said we can never take a one size fits all approach to nursing leadership development. So basically, to make a long story, make it short, this is a program that I've created that is currently available for individuals to be able to sign up and register. On the website, it's available for anyone who would like to, right? But I decided to offer it to a broader audience. If healthcare organizations are interested in making a change in their approach to DEI, right, and want to make a bold statement that says, we respect and value our nurses of color or minority nurse leaders who we believe have been historically excluded from these conversations, and we want to create an environment that will nurture you and support you, that this is the program for your organization. So right now, individuals can sign up, but I would really appreciate the opportunity for any healthcare leader who is in that decision-making capacity, who says, I'm interested in having this program extended to my nurse leaders in my organizations. I also would like to reach out to you as well. And you can certainly contact me after this program. So who should enroll in this program would be any Black or ethnic minority nurse who is either one, aspiring to become a nurse leader or into a formal leadership capacity, and or if you are new to your nurse leadership role, right? Just got appointed and you're looking for additional leadership training and development. And like I said, the curriculum is specific to you in terms of what minorities sometimes face that others do not. And so it's designed to be 8 sessions of group coaching. And also individuals would receive 1 private session with myself, right? We know there's power in groups, but some things come out a little bit more vividly when you are working one-to-one, right? And some of the topics that we cover are core values, foundational influences, and how those impact leadership and style, right? What strategies to use for mapping out your career and for finding opportunities for growth. Of course, we're going to go over leadership competencies, how to build teams, and those core ingredients, right? But we're also, and this is the key element that makes this program so unique, is that we're talking about the requirements, so what you see on the job description, versus the responsibility. And the responsibility as it relates to being a minority in a position of leadership. There is a difference, and many of you can probably understand what I mean by that. Developing professional networks and support systems, as we talked about mentorship being so key earlier, right? So just a description, brief description of what the program would entail. Again, it is currently open to nurse leaders, individuals, right? And I'm just going to put the banner across the bottom so that you can see how to enroll. www.iamdrd.com/CECOL. And the interesting thing about the name of the program, as you can see here, and I'll make this a little bigger for you, the picture of Mary CECOL, who is what the program is kind of the inspiration for the program, who was a Black nurse who served during the Crimean War, but whose efforts were excluded from historical accounts. And what she did was she offered to lend assistance in that war alongside Florence Nightingale, and she was denied the ability to do that. However, right, and that true leadership spirit, right, the CECOL effect, right, that true leadership spirit, she then funded her own trip and traveled to the front lines and set up a hospital for the wounded. And her efforts have really, only been recently appreciated on a global scale. And so I fell in love with her story. And like I said, that true leadership spirit to create an opportunity where she had been previously excluded. Which is why the course is called the CECOL effect. That is the embodiment of the CECOL effect. So I'll leave that up, and we'll continue our conversation. So I see that a few more comments have come in. More emphasis can be shifted towards leading in place. Works well with mentoring. Absolutely. I love that. I would love for you, Corinne, to explain a little bit more about what that means, if you could, what it means to you as how you intended it, leading in place. Yvette says, I agree, mentorship is important. It is, you got to have it. You just have to have it. It's like you don't know, you may have heard this said before, you don't know what you don't know. And so having that mentor to say, look, do this, put this here, ask for this report, right? One of the participants in my study, when she was asked to obtain or to have her first leadership role, right, high level, she said, I didn't know where to turn. I had no formal mentors. I didn't even know what reports to ask for. Things like that are so, seem so trivial, but they're so key, right? What data do I need to do my job effectively? If you don't have the right people to ask those questions, right, sometimes it can be very isolating, right? So I am, let's see, one more comment. I am the only Latina in my DNP program graduating this spring. Also, no other Latinas in leadership in my area. Yeah, it's like we said before, definitely those numbers are inequitable and need improvement. Really, really key, right? Sometimes it's exhausting to feel like the only one, like, and isolating, to feel like you're the only one, or you're the first, or or one of few. Awesome discussion. Thank you all so much for your time and your input. We started a little bit late. I panicked because I didn't see the feed come up, but there's a little bit of a delay. And I'm so glad that it worked out. I am going to go ahead and post the recording for those who, missed it, right? It'll be up for you to comment, and I will definitely respond to every comment as soon as I'm able. So I don't want to belabor the evening, right? It is about 7:30. So if there are no other comments, and if you have questions about the Sequel Effect program, please let me know. I'll definitely answer your questions about that. And go ahead and sign up right now. Registration is open and it's at a discounted rate as an early bird rate, right? And that is up through January 3rd. Again, it's www.iamdrd.com/Sequel, right? Well, if there are no other comments, thank you all so much for your time and for tuning in. I will definitely do this again now that I know how to work this thing. Right? Got to start somewhere. And, happy holidays. Happy holidays. I wish you all well and Happy New Year. Thank you so much, everybody. I see a comment. I enjoyed the discussion. Amazing. Thank you all so much. Thank you for attending. Enjoy the holiday season with your family and friends, and please stay safe. Please stay safe. I succumbed to Omicron. That's what I was saying at the beginning, is that today I almost canceled, but I actually woke up feeling okay. And the bedroom is just down the corner. So if I didn't feel well, I can just always get back in it. But I'm recovering and felt good enough to come on and share with you all tonight because this topic is so important to me. So be safe. Please be safe out there. And again, a thank you and happy holidays and good night.